Crime dramas, podcasts and documentaries are more popular than ever, but for our next guest, coming face to face with dangerous criminals, murderers and psychopaths isn't entertainment, it's his job.
Dr. Shyam Das is a forensic psychiatrist who spent his career getting inside the mind of killers. Now has written down some of his more incredible encounters in a new book, and he joins us now.
Morning.
Good to have you with us.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me on your show.
So, real-life forensic psychiatrist, tell us exactly what that means and what it is you do.
Sure. So a psychiatrist is a medical doctor who deals with mental illness, and a forensic psychiatrist does that, but specifically with offenders or people that have committed high levels of violence. So if I was going to break it down, I'd say there's kind of two areas of my job. There's the area of acting as an expert witness. So I assess people who've committed a serious crime that might be in remand. I make comments on criminal responsibility, whether they're mentally ill or not, whether they need to go to hospital or prison. And then the other side is once they've gone through that process, the small proportion that need long-term rehabilitation and need treatment for their mental illnesses, I help that process and help make them safe to be released into society.
Because I don't want to sound like a bleeding heart liberal or anything, but apart from a crime of passion, it would strike me that anyone who would kill in cold blood would be mentally ill. But is that not the case?
Well, good question. So I suppose that depends on how you define mental illness, doesn't it, right? So if you define it as something very extreme that's filled with hate that most average people wouldn't do, then yes, it would fit into that category. But a psychiatrist would define it as somebody that has a diagnosable mental illness. So schizophrenia, for example, would be a typical presentation. So somebody that's like hearing voices that are compelling them to act violently, or they have paranoid delusions, which cause them to act out sort of preemptively, violently. So that would be the typical kind of case.
And that's the difference between whether someone goes to prison, or goes to an institution that deals with people like, you know, who are mentally ill.
Exactly. So there needs to be symptoms, there needs to be a mental illness to treat. That's the whole rationale of diverting them to these secure units in the first place. Yeah.
As a nation, we have this appetite for those murderer documentaries, podcasts and things like that. Did you have that same appetite, and is that how you fell into this line of work?
I've got to be honest, I kind of stumbled into forensic psychiatry.
Did you?
Yeah, I think I was always interested in criminality. So as a kid, I'd listen to gangster rap, you know, NWA, Snoop Dogg. I used to watch all these mob films, but I didn't realise back then that there was an opportunity to do that as a career. And then I kind of did medicine. I kind of struggled through my university career, just about passed exams, maybe took the socialising a bit too seriously, didn't concentrate on studying, and I never really felt inspired until I did a psychiatry placement. And then, unbeknownst to me, I just clicked with it.
You just loved it?
Yeah, just the people, the stories were so fascinating, stepping into the world of people that had these really sort of strange delusional beliefs, or were at the lowest ebb, like post-suicide attempts, etc., etc. And then forensics specifically is fascinating to me because there's always a backstory. There's always a reason why somebody has followed a life of repeated criminality or ended up with a mental illness. And it's often the same confounding factors. It's often poverty, drug abuse, witnessing domestic violence, all these kind of things.
So tell us about what prompted you to write the book, and what's in it.
So I'd say it's about 10% my own ego and trying to show off a little bit. But I think it's mainly because I have all these stories. I've seen patients that have done, you know, unmentionable things that I couldn't talk about on morning TV without making your viewers being sick on their porridge. But I just thought there's a big thirst out there for it, so I wanted to demystify some of the myths. And also I wanted to focus on the rehabilitation as well. I think, as you mentioned before, Alison, everyone's interested in the lurid details and you know, the big murders, but part of the process is to make people safer and to rehabilitate them. And I think the stories in my book show that people can change and they can be cured and they can be released and be safe to live fulfilling lives in society.
The thing is, you're coming face to face with murderers, killers. Do you ever feel scared? I know on your first day of this job, you actually got punched in the face, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. So I want to make it really clear that I don't want to add to the stigma that people with mental illnesses are dangerous, because the vast majority of them aren't. It just happens to be the ones that I see as a forensic psychiatrist go through the criminal justice system. Having said all that, I didn't help that stigma by getting punched in the face on my first day on a secure unit,
So what happened? Was it just a random attack?
Yeah, absolutely. So the perpetrator was somebody that I didn't know, had never spoken to before. I was actually on the ward assessing somebody else, and he had these delusional beliefs about me. So he believed that I was somebody from his past, a previous bully in disguise. So he just ran up and kind of punched me on the side of the head.
Oh, my God.
Got to be honest, it wasn't actually really that traumatic for me because there was no build-up of tension or threat. It just happened out of the blue. I lost consciousness and I kind of woke up on the floor and it was over before it kind of started. But to answer your previous question, generally speaking, the defendants are on their best behaviour when I assess them, because no matter how antisocial or hostile they might be in real life, they know that I'm writing a report that's going to go to the judge.
Does that make it harder to assess them?
No.
Because they're on their best behaviour. You have to get past that, don't you?
Yeah.
To see who the person really is.
Yeah. But I'd be eliciting more of the actual symptoms of mental illness, so the things I was talking about before, hearing voices, etc. Plus, crucially, you don't just take the word of the defendant in front of you. You have to look at all the evidence. So, case papers, police interviews, CCTV,
right, okay,
etc., etc. Yeah.
What do you think makes a killer? We have to sort of differentiate a psychopath to a killer here, isn't it? I mean, I remember that John Ronson book, and when I read the psychopath test, and the psychopath test that worked out that 4 to 12% of CEOs you could say are psychopaths.
Yeah, but they don't necessarily kill people,
exactly,
do they? Psychopaths.
So I think the term psychopathy is often misunderstood, and it's kind of used colloquially to anybody who's acting violently. But as you say, Dermot, it's much more than that. So a true psychopath can be impulsive. They can sometimes be aggressive, but most importantly, they're manipulative. And they can be quite charming, they can be quite deceitful. So as you say, like CEOs, or in the corporate world, they tend to do quite well. And the reason is because they'll do anything to get a promotion. They will stab somebody in the back, they will tell lies, they will manipulate. I'm sure we've probably all worked with or know people like that who are quite manipulative in their personality. So yeah, that's more of a psychopath than a typical killer.
So what are the traits for killers? What do you normally look for?
That's quite a broad question. I suppose if I had to summarise, there's kind of two ends of the spectrum. So the people that I tend to see, particularly that get sectioned to these forensic units, they tend to have their offences, including murder, are driven directly by symptoms of mental illness. So in theory, they're quite easy to treat and rehabilitate, right? So if you get the right medication, you get rid of the symptoms, then in theory they're safe. Whereas on the other end of the spectrum, you get people who are much more antisocial in their personality. So that's not a mental illness, it's not a different state of mind, it's actually in them, it's like ingrained into their character.
And how much of that do you think is nature nurture? Is everyone product of an environment, or are there just some people that are chemically just imbalanced and there's nothing they can do about it?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both, Dermot. So I think there are definitely traits that run in families, anything from aggression to impulsivity. Wow. But to me, the more important or the more interesting aspect is the nurture. So as I was saying before, I think almost every single defendant I assess has some sort of story in their background, some sort of trauma. It could be really abusive parents, it could be being bullied at school. There's some kind of reason that they have this inferiority complex, and it grows like a cancer and it becomes part of their aggressive personality.
Do you have empathy for them sometimes?
Yes. I think when I carry out my work, sometimes I see people that have committed quite horrific offences, killing strangers, different forms of abuse against children. But a couple of things. First of all, I'm very, very clear in my mind what my role is. And my role is never to judge them. There's a whole criminal justice system there, judges, juries, that has to do that. My role is only to decide whether they've got a mental illness. If so, did they have symptoms? And if so, were they criminally responsible or not? And whether they should go to hospital or prison. So because I'm very clear of that in my mind, I try my best to take judgment out of the situation. That doesn't mean I don't have my own thoughts, but I take it out. And the other thing I'd like to say is that almost every perpetrator is in some way a victim or has been a victim at some point. So it's easy to judge the person in front of you that's done something horrible, but if you take it back, at one point they were a vulnerable, potentially helpless child or adolescent.
Oh my gosh, Sean, we could speak to you all day about this.
You've got a YouTube channel as well, before we let you go, dissecting mental health issues, called Psych for Sore Minds. So what kind of stuff do you upload?
So Psych for Sore Minds, I release a couple of videos a week, so it's everything to do with true crime and its intersection with mental illness.
Oh, great.
So sometimes I look at high-profile cases, sometimes I look at celebrity cases, like Jimmy Savile or R. Kelly recently, and I kind of look what I think are the individual character traits or the situations that put them in their situation.
Yeah.
Amazing. Shaham, In Two Minds is out now. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely
amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.